as our topic for On the Couch. So I will get started, and I've entitled it, Should I Just Get Over It? Hi, Elizabeth. I've been with my husband for almost 6 years, married for almost 2. We have a son together and another on the way. Last year, due to some communication issues and him refusing marriage counselling, I decided we needed some space and asked him to find alternate accommodation until he decided whether he would attend marriage counselling or not. I made it very clear that we are still together, but having him at home with the constant arguing wasn't fair on our kids. I have 2 boys from a previous relationship. Well, not even a week after he moved out, he slept with my best friend's sister, and I also found out he had signed up to multiple dating sites. He says this is because he thought we were broken up, even though we had slept together after he had left and were talking about how we could get our marriage back on track. This is not the first time he has been unfaithful. As far as I'm aware, he has only slept with the one person, but I have previously found inappropriate emails, text messages, etc. to other women. This is just something I can't seem to get over, and I'm not sure I want to anymore. Any advice would be great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your question. And I'm really glad you've reached out to us for help, because this feels like it is a really toxic relationship with toxic patterns going around and around. What I'm seeing in here is a little bit of, it feels almost like Mr. Unreliable. There's something going on here where you're holding all the responsibility in this relationship, and it feels like he holds all the fun. That's what it feels like to me. And the moment you've given him, and it feels like you direct traffic, like you've said, we're not in a good space, we need to have marriage counselling, and then when he's refused, you've said, right, you can, it's like you put him in the naughty corner. You've said, right, you can leave, and when you've worked your head out and we can have marriage counselling, you can come back, sort of thing. And then you've kind of had this situation where you've slept together even though you've told him to move out. It's messy. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. So the first thing I want to say to you is there's something going on here. There's a pattern here where I wonder whether the kind of guys you have in your life are guys that need you to manage them. There's something going on here. I can see you really over-functioning. And you need to really look at what that's about for you, and you need to stop doing it. Because if this relationship is going to work, it needs to be even communication. Now, having said all of that, there's something going on here where he's holding all the fun, but not only that, he's passive-aggressive. And passive-aggressive is characterized by say yes, act no. So you've had a conversation with him, and you've actually said to him, we're still together. Like you're telling me here, I made it very clear to him, we're still together. And I'll bet he sat there, doing this. I'll bet he looked at you and you thought you had agreement from him. But if you think back, he played probably a very clever game. I mean, maybe he didn't. Maybe he did openly say, yes, I agree. Or maybe he didn't. But what he's done is somehow or other, you've ended up feeling like you had an agreement with him about how it was going to be when you had this separate time. And he's gone and done the exact opposite. And that is say yes, act no. It's passive aggressive. And there's something here, I think, about withholding. So what he does is he basically lies by omission. So he tells you bits, and then you find out bits. And then he says, oh, yes, but I thought. Well, I mean, my course that's coming up, I've got a free webinar course coming up called Boundaries When He Isn't Listening, which I am actually going to be recording the webinars, but I thought, well, what's the point of me sitting here? I've still got to pay for the webinar platform, doing all the webinars and creating a course and putting it on the site. I may as well advertise them. You guys can come to them and get benefit of them. I still get to record them, and then they're going to sit on the website as a course. But there's an opportunity for you to come to those webinars, and they're going to be at this time on the Tuesday evening. So they'll be part of this sort of idea of coming on the couch with me in the evening from 7:30 to 8:30 on a Tuesday evening. So I think it would be very helpful for you, because I talk a lot about not being heard, and that's what I think is happening here. You are talking to him, but he's deciding to interpret what you've said the way he wants to interpret it, the way he thinks with what he thinks it means, rather than what you're actually saying, because it's a way of him passive aggressively keeping control of the relationship, actually. All right, so what do you do about it? And this is where I think there are real issues with boundaries here. So I have had couples say to me before that they wanted to have trial separation, okay? And it is messy, because often what happens is it's not clear what the trial separation is about. So, for example, him saying, I thought we were single, is messy, because you've even said, well, we were doing this trial separation thing, or I told him to leave, or I'm not quite sure what it is. Now, maybe that's just because of the way you've written the question. Maybe in your life, in your relationship with him, it was very clear. But you really need to have a clarity of how long he's going to be moved out for, and what the rules are, and whether you two are actually going to be sleeping together or not. Because you've basically said he thought he was single, but then we slept together and we were talking about getting back together. It just feels messy. So one thing I always do say to couples is, if you're going to do a trial separation, incredibly important that you make it really, really clear. Now, I don't know what happened, whether this is just how you've written the question or not, but I'm getting a sense here that it probably wasn't as clear as it could have been. And I am getting a sense here that he took advantage of that. Absolutely. And he, I think, did the passive-aggressive thing of say yes, act no. I feel pretty sure about that. So, what can you do about all this? Because ultimately, he is breaking your trust. And he hasn't just done it once. He's done it, by the sounds of things, many times. Which means you're going round in a circle. Now, I don't know if this infidelity is just one thing you're arguing about, or whether there's other things you're arguing about as well. But it seems like you're caught in this arguing cycle. You know, argument, separate, go and lick your wounds, or go and live in separate houses. Then there's a pursuit where one pursues the other, and somehow you've pursued each other and you've ended up having sex with him even though you're living separately. Then you move perhaps into the honeymoon space. Then there's a build-up. Then there's another argument. Now, when you go round and round and round and round that circle, eventually all the nice parts, the pursuit and the honeymoon, get destroyed until you just have argument, pause, straight across to the build-up, building up, argument, and around you go. And that's usually when either people are living together and they have absolutely no goodwill left at all, or the relationship fails. And it's very hard to come back from that. I often see couples for couples therapy when they're in that space, and it is very, very hard to come back from it. So what can you do about it? Well, the first thing is you need to be really clear about your boundaries, and you need to be almost, to me, you need to wait, you need to be different. And you're kind of on the track with that, because you've said that you don't want to argue and have loud arguments in front of the children anymore. And you're spot on with that, because that's not good for the children at all. So what you need to do is you need to be different. And there's always a risk in being different, because when you're different, you give your partner a very clear message that they've reached your no line. And when you do that, you know, you take your partner into anxiety, and it can cause things to happen in the relationship. And unfortunately for some women, it can cause them to be injured, harmed, killed, all of that stuff. So you need to be really mindful of that in your decision to be different. What I would strongly recommend you do is no more of these crazy arguments. Do whatever you have to do to manage yourself, Pick a moment when things are calm and you need to communicate to him how upset you are. Because he's saying, he promises he'll never do it again. I'm sure that's in here. Let me have a look. He says he won't do it again. I'm sure it's in here. But the thing is, you're saying that you've just had it. You don't think you can get over it again. I can't find it. Sorry, but I'm sure he said that he wouldn't do it again. But you're saying you can't get over it. Well, here's the thing. He has done it again. You found it out several times he's been unfaithful. And messaging women of the opposite sex, other people for sex, is being unfaithful. Sleeping with your best friend's friend, that sister, that's being unfaithful. So he's done this several times, which again is part of this cycle where things don't get resolved. So, I sort of wonder whether in his head, he doesn't think you'll go. He really doesn't think you'll go. So there's something about being different. You need to, I would strongly recommend that you do not threaten to go unless you mean to follow through. Because if every time you threaten to go and then you don't follow through, it just dilutes the threat. And all it does is show him that if he perseveres long enough, you'll cool down and everything will be fine and he can do what he likes, because you'll crack a wobbly, but you'll get over it. Everything will be fine and you'll keep on keeping on. So I think it's really important that you recognize that you need to be different and you need to stick to your guns. So the first thing you need to think about is communicating with him what he's done. And you need to explain to him that he has betrayed your trust, not just once, but many times in many different ways. And the impact of that is that your trust has been destroyed and you are currently not sure what that means for you. Yeah? Just leave it with him. Say you do not know what that means for you. Now, if you're happy to then say to him, if you betray my trust again, it's over, that's fine. That's your decision. That's your boundary. But what I do strongly recommend is that you stick to it. So you need to be communicating that. The next thing you need to think about is the boundaries you need in place for him to rebuild trust. Now, the reality is, if he wants to cheat on you, he will. He'll work it out. However he wants to work it out, he'll work it out. But if it makes you feel better to have all of the codes on his computers, the codes on his phone, that you don't want any phone calls to be taken outside of the room when he's with you, all of those things. If you want those things in place, if it makes you feel better, then you need to spell this out to him. And you need to be very clear and say to him that if there's a transgression of that, then it erodes your trust again and you're back to square one. You need to tell him that every single time he stuffs up, it doesn't just chip away a little bit of the relationship. It takes you to this very space you're in now where you don't know whether you want to be with him anymore. Now, he basically can do with that what he wants. He can choose to believe you. He can choose not to believe you. But if you can have really clear, ordered thinking, it really will help you move forward. And if you can speak to him in a really calm, clear way, then you start to take back your power. Incredibly important. You're in your integrity. You're treating him the way you want him to treat you. And you are basically hearing yourself say the words of what you need from him with absolute clarity. And that will bring your anxiety level right down. Very important. All right. Now, if you don't think that you can get him to listen to you, or you don't think you can do this calmly, think about writing him a letter. The beauty, and of course, another one of my ideas is things I wish I'd said to my ex. And I'm looking at putting together a letter writing course that will teach you how to write a letter to your partner with things you wish you'd said to them or things you need to say to them. So all these wonderful things are coming. So I would strongly suggest that you really think very clearly, and if writing a letter works for you and you can put things in bullet points and make it really clear, and especially if he plays games with he said, she said, it can be very helpful to, you know, have a letter that you can refer back to and say, hey, you read this, it's clear. Yeah? So this is where it's really, really important that you get clear in your own mind, and it will definitely lower your anxiety level. Now, in all of this is the big elephant in the room I haven't talked about, and that is the fact that you are pregnant. And when you are pregnant, it makes you feel incredibly vulnerable because you know you've got to have a safe place for this little person you're bringing into the world. So, and this is his child. So you need to be, I think, setting some ground rules and some boundaries and thinking about if you don't think you can move forward in the relationship with him, then you need to think about how you're going to express that to him. I mean, if you're saying, you've said something I can't seem to get over and I'm not sure I want to anymore. If there is an option for you to split up and you really believe you can make good on it, then you need to be thinking very, very carefully about what you need from him and giving him that, you know, if you feel you want to give him one last chance, then you just need to be absolutely crystal clear with him and say, this is it. You do this to me again, this is it. Yeah? And getting your head really straight. I would also, the other thing, I would be reminding him of the fact you are pregnant and saying to him, this is you. This child coming into the world, you are the father of this child. Is this what you want them to learn? Is this how you want them to be in the world? Because this is not okay. None of it's okay. So you're either going to grow up and you're doing this with me or you're not. And again, if you're not in a space where you can move, if you're not in a space where you can do this on your own, and I don't know how much, I mean, you're talking about 2 children from a previous relationship. Maybe you've left before and you feel incredibly strong. And so maybe, you know, maybe you don't just feel incredibly strong. I mean, to leave a relationship with 2 children is a huge thing to do. And if that's the case, then, you know, maybe it is an option for you to go. But it's thinking about how you can really do things in your greatest integrity and thinking things through in the clearest way you possibly can. And if you really believe that he basically cannot win back your trust, then you need to think very carefully about whether you want to continue in the relationship. And if it means you have to stay, then it's what that relationship looks like moving forward. Because there are ways of setting up consequences in a relationship without leaving. And those consequences can be things like, you know, we are co-parenting. You know, things like that. I mean, you haven't gone into detail. Maybe the house is yours and that's why you asked him to leave. I don't know. But you can say things to him like that. Like, if you do not, you know, if you either want this relationship or you don't. Because if you keep going the way you are, all that's going to happen is he's going to think, well, she cracks the spaz and then she's never going to leave. I can do what I like. I can be in this relationship and I can piss off and I can do whatever. And you just go round and round and round and round and round and nothing will change. Because unless he takes responsibility, this is not about you, it's about him. He's got to take responsibility and decide that he really is in a relationship with you. And as heartbreaking as it is, the relationship is not worth it if he's going to keep hurting you like this. It's just not. But what the end result and what the consequences are of his behaviour, I can't tell you what to do and I can't answer, really, because I don't have enough information to know. But for you, I would say to you, just be clear. Just be absolutely crystal clear and stick to it. That's what's really important. So you don't threaten to go unless you fully intend to go. If it's going to be co-parenting, then it's co-parenting, and that means you don't weaken and have sex with him. You know, even if you're in the same house, you say, this is it. This is it. You've broken my heart. We are co-parenting this child, and that's it. I know I'm kind of being hard, and it's terribly difficult because, you know, in my mind, I've got this thing that you're pregnant. But by the same token, it would be very bad advice for me to say to you just put up with it because you're pregnant and because you need him, I mean, that's just it's not good advice for you. Because every single time you put up with how he is, all you do is create a really toxic interaction. And if your children are watching this, if they're watching you lay down boundaries and then give in, and they're watching this arguing cycle, you are 100% right. This is not a good thing for them to be seeing. They need to see their mum takes a stand about the behaviour. And I think, you know, it's hard as it is. I want you to think about this taking charge, what that's about. Because when we take charge in a relationship and we manage the other person, we set ourselves up to attract guys who don't take responsibility for anything. And I'm wondering if that's a pattern happening for you. And if that's the case, you need to think very carefully about childhood patterns, what that's about, how that plays out for you, so that you start to identify your triggers, so that when you are in a relationship and you start doing same old, that you can interrupt yourself and say, now hang on a minute, what am I doing here? I'm taking control of the relationship. I'm thinking for both of us. I'm making demands and nothing's changing. What is this? And thinking about the kinds of guys you meet. Are these the kind of guys that say, you know, that need fixing or need helping? You know, are they wounded birds that you pick up, and what that means for you? Now, I have written a book that I think you would find helpful. It's called Stop Kissing Toads, Pucker Up and Find Your Handsome Prince. And that talks about exactly that. And the book is a really quite a light read. It's lovely big print. And I've been very careful. A lot of my clients, I'd recommend books for them to read, and they'd come back to me and they'd say, well, there was all these case studies and I just flicked past them. Or I read the case studies and none of them applied to me. So they would look at the case studies literally, and because the case studies didn't reflect their life, they'd say, oh, well, then I don't need to look at that. So I've written my book quite differently to how other therapists write books. It's quite specific in the way it's written, and it'll give you real guidance to really dig in deep and work out what's going on for you about the choices that you're making in your partner. And that's it from me. I think I've finished. I hope that has been helpful to you. I am really sorry this has happened to you, and I'm sorry that it's happened to you at this time, and you must be feeling so exhausted being pregnant and having this going on at the same time. And that's why your self-care is incredibly important for you. Very important. Because without self-care, you're not going to be able to advocate for yourself or for your children. And any decision that you make really needs to be looking at yourself, your baby, and your two children that you already have, and making the right decisions for them. That's what you really need to be doing. He's big enough and ugly enough to look after himself by the sounds of things. So yeah. Don't forget meet up on Sunday, where we're all getting together and having lunch at One Misty Guy. I will put the link in the comments to go over and purchase your tickets. Now, I'm just thinking of what's on the blog, and there is an article on the blog, Why Are Relationship Boundaries So Hard? And I'm thinking that might be a really good one as some additional reading for you, so I will put that in the comments for you as well. And I will also put the link to go and purchase my book, Stop Kissing Toads, which I think would be really helpful for you. Although it's a book and it's about identifying toxic men, so that you don't end up stuck with them, there is some really great reflective material in there to really help you work out the choices you make and things like that. And of course, keep an eye out, because Boundaries When He Isn't Listening is coming, and that will be all about communication tools to encourage men to really hear you and to help you express yourself in really clear ways so that you hear yourself talk. Because when you hear yourself speak and you get your my brain's not working. You get your boundaries and your ideas really clear about what you want. It really builds your confidence and it takes you into that sense of integrity. So that's it from me. Have a wonderful evening. I'm going out to watch Married at First Sight,